All children believe that if they behave, obey their parents, and do everything they're supposed to, nothing bad would happen to them. So imagine yourself as a 10-year-old girl living in a little town where you have spent your whole life. You have a little brother who is 4, a mother and a father who are loving and supportive. 5 uncles who live nearby with their families, including your cousins. You have always been a good student, well behaved at home, and respectful of your parents whom you love. Suddenly, for no reason at all, people who were your neighbors turn up arms against you, your family, and everyone like you in your country. Suddenly, your childhood is being taken away forever. And after 3 years of struggling to survive in a war you don't understand, you finally feel protected when your little town is declared to be the first UN safe zone. In July of 1995, I was that 10-year-old girl. My little town is better known today as the place where the worst case of genocide happened after World War II. My little town is Srebrenica, Bosnia. My name is Seda Fajozic, and today I want to tell you just a few parts of my story. After we learned that our town had been declared a safe zone and that the UN troops would be stationed there, I felt safe for the first time in those 3.5 years. During those years, my family, our neighbors, friends, and I lived in a constant fear of a knock on a door coming from Serb troops. The fear was so great that during one 2-month period, we lived, my family, our friends, neighbors, which was 19 other people, lived in a 5.5-foot deep trench we dug in the woods behind my home. There was barely enough room for everybody in this long, narrow space. We covered the trench with branches and leaves so it would look like every other part of the forest floor. We had abandoned our pets out of fear that they would bark or mew at just the wrong time to give away our hiding place. But in July of 1995, with Srebrenica now a safe zone, I felt I could begin to forget about experiences like that. I was wrong. In early July, Serbs began cutting down trees on hills overlooking my town. Pretty soon we could see them stationed on the hilltops, and of course, they could see us. Rumors began circulating throughout the town that the Serb forces were going to attack us. Many people did not believe these rumors. After all, there were no Bosnian troops in Srebrenica. Srebrenica had been disarmed by the UN because a safe zone means disarm and protect. Everyone in the town, including all the men, were civilians. On top of that, now we had UN to keep our town safe. Again, I was wrong. When the bombing began again, my father told us that we had to leave our home and go to the center of town, where the UN troops were stationed. When we arrived at the center of Srebrenica, the leaders among the men told us that the women and children should get to Potočari, a village 4 to 5 kilometers from center of Srebrenica. Potočari was where the main UN force was stationed. All of the UN troops in Srebrenica were planning to leave and go to Potočari themselves. The men, our fathers, husbands, brothers, said they were going to try to get past the Serbian troops by traveling through the woods in an effort to reach Tuzla, which at the time was free Muslim territory. To a 10-year-old girl, none of this made any sense. We were supposed to be safe, finally. But here my father was saying that my brother, my mother, and I needed to go. As he told us that we should go with the UN troops to Potocari, all I could do was cry. And in the end, say goodbye. That was the last time I ever saw my father. It was the last time my father stroked my and my brother's hair. It was the last time I had a father. It was the last moment I had a complete family. It was the last time I waved to him, crossing the bridge and heard the words, "Take care of yourself. Take good care of yourself." As if he knew that there wouldn't be anyone else to take care of me. As if he knew what was coming. The next day I was hoping he would come back. I was looking through the window of our friend's apartment where we had spent the night. I was looking for a familiar smile and warm hug. I was imagining our next meeting. We were listening to the news on the radio. We believed that the world and those who had power would never allow anything bad to happen or anyone to be killed. We believed that UN forces would protect us. We were so wrong. We listened on the radio to a UN report saying that the situation in Srebrenica was improving, that people were returning home, and that everything was under control. I looked out the window and saw an even bigger crowd than the previous night, with people running from one end of the street to another because the shells were falling too close to them. When we came to Potocari, we slept on the street. The next day, I watched a small group of Serbs, fewer than 10, take the uniforms, vehicles, and weapons from UN soldiers with no resistance, dressed as UN soldiers and driving UN vehicles. They drove off in the direction where the Srebrenica men were headed. The day after we arrived in Potocari, the armed Serbs entered the village, despite the UN presence. I remember we had only one loaf of bread that 7 people were sharing. We did not have enough water. Once Serbs came into Potocari, they started killing as many as they could. We could not get to the spring for water because the way was covered with people's bodies and blood. The second night in Potocari, we heard horrifying screams. I do not know where they were coming from or what caused them. I believe people were tortured. We spent 3 days in Potocari, and then we were evacuated to Tuzla. On the way to the buses and trucks, there were so many people that it was hard to breathe because we were squeezed together. When we came to the front of the line, we realized that it was the Serbian trucks waiting for us, not the UN vehicles. We wanted to go back, but it was too late. As a 10-year-old girl, I did not understand why the peacekeeping forces failed to protect us. Looking back on it now, as a young adult, I still don't. It seems to me that no one in the world, including many in my own country, cared enough about us to stop the killing. Once Serbs had seized all the men and teenage boys, the women and young children boarded the trucks. My 8-year-old cousin, a boy, almost didn't make it because the Serbs wanted to take him too, as they in fact did with many other boys. I heard them say, take him away, because in a few years he will grow up and be on the other side. He will fight against us. As we began traveling to Tuzla, a large rock came into our truck and hit my brother, 5 at the time, while he was sleeping. I looked up and saw that it had been thrown by a Serbian child. There were so many Serbs lining the street, adults and children, throwing stones and shouting horrible things at us. To this day, I find it impossible to comprehend how such hatred and rage can exist simply because of ethnic difference, and how parents can pass this on to their children. Before we reached Tuzla, we were ordered off the trucks and told to walk in the middle of the street until we reached Muslim-held territory. And we did. We walked. We walked for hours and hours. We had no water, no food, but did not stop for a minute to take a break. We felt so close to freedom, we wanted to run towards it, but we couldn't. We were afraid that if we disobeyed the order to walk, Serbs would shoot us. We could feel the danger and smell the death. So we just kept walking. When we finally reached Tuzla, I believed my father was there. I believed that he would come and find us. I believed that he had reached Tuzla safely, because I never imagined that the Serbs would murder so many civilians. I was wrong yet again. A few weeks later, the Dayton Accord was signed, and in terms of active fighting, the war was over. But for me, my family, and all other families of the men from Srebrenica, there has been no closure. All of us are considered refugees within our own country, whether we live now in Sarajevo, Tuzla, or elsewhere. There isn't even talk within the Bosnian government requiring us to move back. Such a forced relocation would be terrifying to me and most others I know. To us, Srebrenica is no longer a home. It is a place filled with fear, pain, and death. Today, Srebrenica is part of Serbs' country, the Republika Srpska, designated by Dayton Peace Accord. As the time passed, following the peace agreement, and no word about my father had been received, my family and I had to resume living as best we could. We lived in a school that had been transformed into a refugee camp. Later, we lived in a small house outside Tuzla. And later still, we moved to a suburb of Sarajevo and lived in an empty, abandoned, and almost completely destroyed Serbs' apartment until our government ordered us to leave so that the returning Serb could retake possession. The government told us that we had only 7 days to leave. If we refused or could not find somewhere else to live by that time, the police had ordered to throw us out without allowing us to take anything with us. So there we were. On July the 11th, 1995, the world had abandoned us. And then, years later, our own government made it clear that we still didn't matter. Somehow, through all of this, I have been one of the lucky ones. I just completed my sophomore year at Georgia Tech, where I'm majoring in biomedical engineering. How I got there is another story entirely, involving Bosnian American Society, a small group of Bosnians in Atlanta, in the USA, dedicated to helping children from Srebrenica, and a remarkable woman, Susan Anderson, and the organization she founded and runs, the Outreach Foundation. Yet, I never felt far from horror of July 1995. Some of you probably heard about the video recently made public by Hague Tribunal. That film shows Serb murdering Muslim boys from Srebrenica, my cousin Asmir, is the second boy executed. When I saw the video, I imagined my aunt turning on the TV to watch the evening news, to hear something, anything about war criminals being brought to justice, only to see her 16-year-old son being killed. So many murders, so much agony and grief, and so many monsters still enjoying freedom. It just doesn't seem possible that it could be real, even though I know it is. In fact, for the longest time, I thought I was simply asleep and having a terrible dream. I believed that I would wake up one morning and everything would be fine. My father would be there and our family would be happy once again. I still believe and cherish the hope that he's alive. But unfortunately, I have never awakened from that dream. My father has never walked through our front door. I have never ran into his arms again or sat in his lap. I have not been able to tell him how much I missed him. I've never felt him stroke my hair again. Even after 10 years, the wounds are still raw and pain too close to the surface. So if today in the things I have said to you, I sounded somewhat detached or overly in control, please understand it was for a very good reason. I wanted you to hear my story. I didn't want you to watch me cry.